You think customers at your job are entitled? Imagine a client demanding a full refund on a prepaid funeral because their wife didn't die on schedule, or a family screaming at the director to exhume dad immediately because they left a winning lottery ticket in his suit pocket. I found a list of the most unhinged, real complaints sent to funeral homes, including someone who was furious that the hearse driver stopped for a drive-through cheeseburger while the body was in the back, and they only get crazier from there. You have to hear these to believe them, so keep watching, because the complaint about the chunky ashes is going to make you question reality. 1. A grieving woman stormed into the director's office with a furious expression regarding her late grandfather. How she screamed that the mortician had committed a serious error because Grandpa looked way too happy in the casket. Apparently, the old man was a miserable grump his entire life and never smiled once since 1982. The woman insisted they redo the makeup immediately to wipe that peaceful smirk off his face and preserve his legacy of pure hatred. She demanded they furrow his brows and frown his lips so guests would recognize him. Who actually complains that a dead person looks too peaceful at rest? 2. A distraught widow filed a formal complaint after touching her late husband's hands during the open casket visitation. She was absolutely horrified to discover that his skin felt ice-cold to the touch despite being inside a building. The woman argued that the funeral home should have installed electric heating pads inside the suit jacket to maintain a lifelike temperature. She genuinely believed a body should remain at 98.6 degrees even after 3 days in a cooler. The staff tried to explain basic biology, but she demanded a refund for the lack of warmth. Do people really forget how death works? 3. A furious son called the funeral home screaming about the absolute disrespect shown by the hearse driver during the solemn procession. The driver apparently got hungry halfway to the cemetery and decided to pull the long black vehicle right into a McDonald's drive-thru. The grieving mother was sitting in the back seat sobbing, while the driver casually ordered a double cheeseburger and large fries. He even had the nerve to eat the salty fries while driving the casket to the burial site. The family demanded he be fired immediately for prioritizing his lunch over the dead. Does a Big Mac really take priority over a funeral? 4. A very suspicious daughter decided she needed to verify the quality of the expensive purchase before the service began. She actually climbed inside the $8,000 mahogany casket to test the comfort level herself. After lying there for 5 minutes, she climbed out and started yelling at the director about the neck support. She claimed the pillow provided 0 orthopedic benefits and would give her father a stiff neck in the afterlife. She refused to pay the bill unless they swapped it for a memory foam version immediately. Why do people worry about back pain when the person is literally dead? 5. A large, muscular man stormed back into the crematorium holding his father's urn with a look of pure accusation. He told the staff that he had weighed the container at home, and the numbers did not add up at all. His father was a 300-pound man, but the ashes only weighed a few pounds. The son accused the director of stealing half the body and keeping it for himself for some sick reason. He demanded the rest of his dad be returned instantly, or he would call the police. Do people honestly think you get 300 pounds of ash back? 6. A wealthy businessman threatened a massive lawsuit after a rainstorm occurred during his mother's graveside service. He screamed that the funeral home should have checked the forecast and built a giant glass dome over the entire cemetery. He claimed that because he paid top dollar for the service, he was entitled to perfect sunny weather on demand. The man insisted on a full refund because his suit got wet and nobody warned him about the clouds. The director tried to explain he is not a weather god, but the man refused to listen. Since when do morticians control the literal sky and clouds? 7. A frantic teenager caused a huge scene in the hallway because the funeral home internet was lagging during the visitation. He was trying to live stream his grandfather's open casket to his Twitch followers, and the buffer speed was ruining his content. The boy shouted at the staff that they were sabotaging his career and he was losing subscribers by the second. He demanded they upgrade to fiber optic immediately so he could get high-definition footage of the body. The parents just stood there while he asked for the Wi-Fi password again. Is nothing sacred anymore, or is everything just for content? 8. A panicked family rushed into the office 2 days after the burial, begging for an emergency exhumation order. The eldest son realized they had forgotten his dad's winning lottery ticket inside the suit pocket before the lid was closed. They were screaming that the jackpot was worth millions, and they needed to dig him up right now to retrieve the cash. The director explained that digging up a grave takes legal paperwork, but they grabbed shovels from their trunk to do it themselves. They were ready to desecrate a grave for money. Would you dig up a relative for $1 million? 9. An angry aunt cornered the sound technician after the service concluded and accused him of playing a cruel prank. As the pallbearers were rolling the casket out, the speakers suddenly blasted the song "Another One Bites the Dust." The technician swore it was a random Bluetooth glitch from a passing car, but the family was not buying it. The aunt claimed it was a deliberate act of mockery and demanded a formal apology in the newspaper. Everyone at the service was horrified as the bass line kicked in at the worst possible moment. Can you imagine a worse song for a funeral? 10. An old man complained that the visitation room smelled way too much like fresh lilies and flowers. He argued that his late brother absolutely hated gardening, and the floral scent was basically an insult to his memory. The man suggested the funeral home should have piped in the smell of heavy cigar smoke and sawdust to make it authentic. He wanted the entire chapel to smell like a dirty workshop instead of a clean room. The staff tried to explain that flowers are standard, but he refused to accept the excuse. Who actually wants a funeral home to smell like stale tobacco? 11. A suspicious grandson stared at the open casket and immediately called the director over with a wild accusation. He noticed the suit jacket was bunching up around the shoulders and looked slightly too big on the old man. The young man claimed the funeral home had deliberately shrunk his grandfather in a dryer to save money on casket space. He refused to believe that people lose muscle mass when they are sick and demanded a tape measure right there in the chapel. He was convinced they had swapped the body for a smaller person just to cut corners. Do people really think human bodies shrink like cheap cotton t-shirts in the wash? 12. A weeping daughter screamed at the limo driver for taking the most efficient route to the burial site. She had apparently given specific instructions to drive past a dirty dive bar on the other side of town. The driver explained that the detour would add 45 minutes to the trip, but she did not care at all about the schedule. She insisted her father needed to see his favorite watering hole one last time before going into the ground forever. The guests were hungry and tired, but she wanted a pub crawl with a hearse. Does a dead person really care about missing happy hour traffic? 13. A strict elderly woman demanded her husband be dug up and moved to a different section immediately. She had just realized the grave next to his belonged to a man known for heavy drinking back in the 1970s. She was terrified that the neighbor would be a bad influence on her husband in the afterlife and lead him astray. The director tried to explain that dead people do not throw parties, but she was having none of it. She refused to let her husband rest near a bad crowd. Can you actually worry about peer pressure inside a cemetery? 14. A furious man marched into the office demanding a 90% refund for the entire funeral service bill. He had rented the largest chapel available, but only 10 people showed up because of a massive blizzard outside. The man blamed the funeral home for poor marketing and failing to attract a bigger crowd for the event. He claimed he paid for a full house and the empty seats were a breach of contract by the director. He truly believed funerals were popularity contests that the staff had to promote. Is a funeral supposed to be a sold-out concert event? 15. A frantic daughter caused a scene right before the lid was closed because her father was not wearing his glasses. She screamed at the mortician that her dad was legally blind and could not see a thing without his thick lenses. The woman was genuinely terrified that he would never be able to find the pearly gates if he was buried with blurry vision. She forced the staff to retrieve the glasses from the car and put them on his cold face. She thought the afterlife had street signs. Do spirits really need a prescription to see where they are going? 16. A cheap nephew tried to settle the bill for his aunt's funeral using a crumpled piece of paper. It turned out to be a coupon for $50 off from a competitor funeral home across town. The coupon had expired 3 years ago, but he insisted they honor it, or he would report them to the Better Business Bureau. The man argued that a deal is a deal and refused to pay the full price until the discount was applied. He was willing to fight over $50. Who brings a coupon to a place where people are crying? 17. A party-loving cousin was absolutely disgusted by the lack of amenities inside the family limousine during the drive. He yelled at the driver because the minibar was not stocked with chilled champagne and premium vodka bottles. The man claimed that the service charge on the bill implied an open bar, and he expected to get drunk on the way to the grave. He called the funeral home cheap for only providing tissues and water bottles instead of booze. He wanted a nightclub experience in a grieving vehicle. Is the ride to the cemetery really the time to party? 18. A concerned wife stopped the entire burial service because she hated the color of the concrete vault liner. She was upset that it was a standard gray color and demanded it be painted bright neon orange immediately. Her reasoning was that her husband had a terrible sense of direction and would get lost in the dark without a bright marker. She wanted him to be able to find his own body if his spirit ever wandered away from the grave. The workers had to explain that paint does not glow underground. Do people think the afterlife needs traffic cones? 19. A gambling addict son was furious when he saw his father's hands crossed politely over his chest. He told the director that his dad was a professional poker player, and looking like a saint was false advertising. The son pulled a deck of cards from his pocket and demanded they arrange the stiff fingers to hold a royal flush. He spent 20 minutes trying to wedge the cards between the cold fingers so his dad could look cool forever. The staff watched in horror as he treated the body like a prop. Is a winning hand worth disturbing the dead? 20. A divorced man threatened to sue the funeral home because his ex-wife managed to walk into the chapel. He had specifically told the staff that if she showed up, they were legally obligated to tackle her to the floor. The man screamed that the funeral director failed his security duties by not physically assaulting a 60-year-old woman at the door. He expected the ushers to act like bouncers at a dive bar and throw people out on the street. He wanted violence at a peaceful memorial service. Do funeral directors look like trained SWAT team members? 21. A tech-illiterate family sent a tiny pixelated thumbnail image for the obituary and then screamed when it looked blurry in the newspaper. The daughter claimed the funeral home director should have used Hollywood-level enhancement software to fix the resolution instantly. She accused them of making her mother look like a jagged video game character from the 80s on purpose. The staff tried to explain that you cannot create detail from nothing, but she refused to listen to logic. She demanded a full refund for the newspaper ad because her mom deserved high definition. She actually believed that zoom and enhance was a real button on every computer. Do people think real life works like a crime show? 22. A fashion-obsessed niece had a total meltdown when she looked inside the bottom half of the casket. She noticed her uncle was wearing his nice leather Sunday shoes instead of the special casket footwear she requested. She screamed that the soles of his feet were going to be uncomfortable for eternity because leather does not breathe well underground. The director explained that nobody sees the feet, but she insisted they change them immediately. She claimed that comfort is paramount even when the person cannot feel their toes anymore. She made them untie the laces right there. Does a dead man really need arch support? 23. A snobby socialite was absolutely appalled that regular people were allowed to sign the official guest book. She yelled at the staff for not having a bouncer to check identification at the chapel entrance. She claimed she wanted a strictly exclusive list of very important people only, and the book was now ruined by common signatures. The woman demanded the funeral home tear out the pages with names she did not recognize or like. She treated the memorial service like it was a red carpet event for celebrities. Since when do you need to be on a list to pay respects? 24. A grumpy old man filed a complaint about the interior design choices in the main viewing room. He was furious that the wallpaper had a floral pattern because his brother hated flowers and gardening. He demanded that the funeral home strip the walls and repaper the entire room in a tartan plaid pattern within an hour. The man argued that the feminine decor was an insult to his brother's masculinity and refused to pay the facility fee. He expected a total renovation of the building just for a 2-hour service. Who remodels a building for a single afternoon? 25. A rude cousin pulled his truck into the lot and started honking his horn at the hearse driver. He was incredibly angry that the long black vehicle was parked in the most convenient spot right near the front door. The man screamed that the dead guy inside does not need to walk, so he should park in the back. He believed the prime parking real estate should be reserved for the living guests who paid for gas. The director was stunned that someone would ask a hearse to move during a funeral. Is walking 20 feet really too much to ask? 26. A picky widow stood at the gravesite and refused to let the burial proceed until she spoke to the manager. She was disgusted that the plot faced the maintenance shed instead of the rolling green hills in the distance. She argued that her husband would be staring at lawnmowers and rakes for all of eternity, which was unacceptable. The woman demanded they dig a new hole on the other side of the hill immediately so he could enjoy the scenery. The staff explained he would be 6 feet under dirt anyway. Does the view really matter when your eyes are closed? 27. A furious stepson cornered the funeral director after the service and blamed him for a mistake the pastor made. The clergy member had accidentally called the deceased Bob instead of Bill during the opening prayer. The man screamed that it was the director's job to tackle the priest mid-sentence and correct him on the microphone. He claimed the entire service was null and void because the wrong name was spoken to heaven. He genuinely believed his dad would not get into the afterlife because of a clerical error. Do people think God checks identification cards at the gate? 28. A high-maintenance daughter touched the white sheet covering her father during the transfer and gasped in horror. She realized the fabric was a high-quality cotton blend instead of the pure imported silk she expected. She yelled at the transport team that her father never wore anything but silk against his skin in his life. The woman accused them of being cheap and disrespectful for using standard linens on a wealthy man. She demanded they go to a fabric store and sew a custom shroud before moving him an inch. Can you feel thread count when you are no longer breathing? 29. A shivering aunt interrupted the visitation to scream at the staff about the temperature in the viewing room. She was wearing a sleeveless dress and felt chilly, so she demanded they crank the thermostat up to 75 degrees. The director tried to explain that a cool room is necessary to preserve the body in the open casket. She shouted that she did not care about science and her comfort was more important than the corpse's condition. She wanted the room to feel like a tropical beach vacation. Would you rather be warm or have a decomposing body in the room? 30. A vain woman marched into the office holding a heavy brass urn and pointed a finger at the receptionist. She was furious because she tried to pry the lid open to show her neighbor the ashes and chipped her manicure. The woman claimed the urn was a defective product because it was sealed too tightly for her liking. She demanded the funeral home pay for her nail salon appointment to fix the damage immediately. The staff had to explain that urns are designed to stay closed to prevent spilling. Who opens an urn just to show off what is inside? 31. A frantic widow called the crematorium just 3 hours after dropping off her husband at the front door. She screamed into the phone asking why his ashes were not ready for pickup yet. The staff politely explained that the process takes considerable time and cooling, but she lost her mind. She shouted that if a pizza place can cook a large pepperoni pie in 20 minutes, then a human body should be fast too. She accused them of being lazy and demanded a discount for slow service like a 30-minute delivery guarantee. Do people actually think cremation is like ordering fast food takeout? 32. A spiritual guru cousin stormed up to the audio booth after the eulogy concluded with a face full of rage. He claimed the entire funeral service was completely destroyed because the microphone made a high-pitched squeak for 1 single second. The man insisted that the audio feedback interrupted the soul's journey to the afterlife and severed the connection permanently. He demanded the sound technician be fired on the spot for spiritual negligence during the sacred prayer. He refused to leave until they replayed the entire service without the noise. Can a 1-second glitch really trap a ghost in the speakers? 33. A frugal uncle was spotted running around the funeral home shoving entire boxes of tissues into his oversized coat pockets. He later screamed at the director that the establishment was trying to upsell the family on premium crying paper. The man claimed he was liberating the supplies so the funeral home could not profit from their grief and tears. He walked out to his car with 12 boxes of Kleenex and refused to return them to the chapel. He believed he was a hero for stealing paper products during a wake. Is stealing supplies the best way to honor the dead? 34. A mortified granddaughter caused a scene when a loud ringtone started playing from inside the closed casket. Everyone froze as the muffled sound of a classic rock song echoed from the wooden box during the silence. She blamed the funeral director for not installing a military-grade signal jammer in the chapel walls to block all calls. She screamed that they should have anticipated that someone would forget to silence the corpse's cell phone before the lid was closed. She demanded they open it up right now to turn it off. Do funeral homes really need to block cellular satellites? 35. A horrified niece opened the urn to spread the ashes and immediately called the funeral home in a total panic. She was disgusted to find small bone fragments mixed in with the gray dust and felt sick. The woman accused the crematorium staff of being lazy and not cooking her aunt long enough in the fire chamber. She shouted that she paid for a fine powder and these chunks were a breach of contract. She wanted them to put the ashes back in the oven for another hour. Does she think the body turns into instant hot cocoa mix? 36. A perfectionist brother stopped the entire procession in the parking lot to inspect the long black hearse. He found a tiny fingerprint smudge on the rear window and went absolutely ballistic on the driver. The man screamed that he paid for a pristine vehicle and this smudge was a stain on the family honor. He refused to let the car move until someone came out with glass cleaner and a microfiber cloth immediately. He expected showroom quality for a 5-mile drive down a dusty road. Does a single fingerprint really ruin the final ride? 37. An angry gardener daughter called the cemetery office 2 weeks after the burial to lodge a formal complaint. She was furious that the cut flowers she left on the fresh grave had started to turn brown and wilt. The woman insisted that the groundskeepers should have been spraying them with preservatives and watering them every single hour. She claimed they let the bouquet die on purpose to force her to buy more from the shop. The staff explained that cut flowers eventually die, but she called them liars. Do people think flowers are immortal in a graveyard? 38. A disorganized family rolled into the parking lot 45 minutes after the service was scheduled to begin. They were shocked to see the guests leaving and the director locking the chapel doors for the day. The father screamed that the funeral home should have known they were running on family time and waited. He demanded that the missed 45 minutes be refunded or tacked onto the end for free. He genuinely thought the entire world stopped because he could not find his car keys. Does time stand still just because you are late? 39. A stressed-out sister dragged the funeral director into the hallway to point out her intoxicated uncle. The man was loudly singing songs in the back row and stumbling over the flower arrangements. The woman screamed that the staff should have been breathalyzing every single guest at the front door before entry. She blamed the funeral home for allowing a drunk person into a somber event and ruining the vibe. She expected the ushers to act like police officers and conduct sobriety field tests. Since when is a funeral home responsible for your family drinking habits? 40. A frustrated hiker's son came back from a mountain trip with the scattering tube still full of ashes. He slammed the cardboard cylinder on the desk and yelled that the perforated tab was impossible to pop open. He claimed the family looked like idiots standing on a cliffside trying to figure out the instructions in the wind. The man demanded a refund for the tube because it ruined their cinematic moment of release. He said the cardboard was stronger than steel and refused to break. Why do simple instructions become impossible when you are grieving? 41. A horrified grandson stared at the open casket and immediately accused the mortician of breaking his grandfather's jaw. He noticed the dentures in the mouth looked completely wrong and did not fit the face naturally. The staff checked the records and realized the nursing home had sent the wrong set of teeth in a plastic cup. The grandson screamed that they should have used dental glue or forced them to fit regardless of the size. He believed the funeral home should have performed emergency dentistry on a corpse to make the smile work. Do false teeth really matter when you never need to chew again? 42. A high-maintenance fashionista filed a lawsuit threat after walking through the cemetery after a heavy rainstorm. She was furious that the grass was wet and muddy, which completely ruined her expensive designer heels. The woman screamed that the funeral home should have rolled out a red carpet all the way to the gravesite. She claimed that dirt and nature have no place in a cemetery and expected a pristine runway experience. The director tried to explain that graves are literally holes in the dirt, but she refused to listen. Who wears stilettos to walk on soft, wet grass? 43. A very alive and angry husband stormed into the office demanding a full refund for a prepaid funeral contract. He had paid for his sick wife's service in advance, but she miraculously recovered and was doing fine. The man shouted that he was not going to die on their schedule and wanted his money back immediately. He accused the funeral director of betting against his wife's survival and running a scam. He treated the life-saving recovery like a customer service inconvenience. Is it normal to be mad that your spouse did not die on time? 44. A jealous stepmother stopped the video tribute halfway through the service and demanded the projector be turned off. She saw a single photo of her late husband standing next to his first wife from 30 years ago. The woman screamed that the funeral director should have intuitively known to censor that image from the reel. She claimed it was a personal attack on her marriage and refused to let the slideshow continue until the slide was deleted. The staff had no idea who the woman in the photo even was. Do morticians have psychic powers to know your family drama? 45. A perfectionist creative director was appalled by the lack of symmetry during the casket-carrying procession. He complained that the 6 pallbearers were all different heights, which made the photos look uneven and messy. The man screamed that the funeral home should have provided 6 professional men who were exactly 6 feet tall. He wanted the coffin to remain perfectly level like it was on a conveyor belt. He argued that his short cousins ruined the aesthetic of the entire day. Since when are family members chosen by height instead of love? 46. A dramatic mother watched the funeral director standing respectfully at the back of the room and got angry. She marched over and demanded to know why he was not crying his eyes out during the service. The woman claimed that dry eyes were a sign of total disrespect, and he should be weeping for her loss. She insisted that she paid for emotion and he needed to shed visible tears immediately to earn his fee. The director explained he did not know the deceased personally, but she did not care. Do you really want a stranger fake crying at your funeral? 47. A large family squeezed into the provided sedan and immediately started complaining about the lack of legroom. The father yelled at the driver that the car was way too small for their needs. It turned out they were trying to fit a massive cooler full of soda cans on the floorboard between their feet. The man screamed that the limo service should have anticipated their need for refreshments and sent a bus. He blamed the car size for crushing his sandwiches and drinks. Who brings a tailgate picnic cooler into a funeral procession car? 48. A cheap, do-it-yourself enthusiast got into a heated argument with the groundskeeper over the burial fee. The man offered to bring his own shovel from his garage and dig the 6-foot hole himself for a discount. When the cemetery refused due to safety laws, he accused them of having a monopoly on dirt. He screamed that he could dig a better hole in half the time and save $1,000. He genuinely wanted to spend his afternoon sweating in a pit to save a few bucks. Is digging a grave really a DIY weekend project? 49. A conspiracy theorist daughter saw her mother's obituary in the newspaper and immediately called the funeral home in a rage. The tribute was printed right next to a large advertisement for a Labor Day mattress sale. She accused the director of coordinating a cruel joke with the newspaper editor to mock her mother. The woman screamed that it was a deliberate subliminal message about eternal rest and refused to believe it was a coincidence. She demanded the newspaper reprint the entire page without the ads. Do funeral directors control the advertising department of the local paper? 50. A culinary critic widow was disgusted by the food served at the post-funeral reception in the hall. She shouted at the catering staff because the sandwiches were cut into triangles instead of squares. The woman claimed her late husband hated triangles, and this shape was a direct insult to his memory. She demanded the kitchen staff come out and recut every single sandwich immediately or she would not pay. The workers stared in confusion as she explained the geometry of grief. Does the shape of the bread really change how the ham tastes? 51. A social media-obsessed teenager caused a massive scene during the middle of the eulogy service. He stood up and shouted that his battery was at 4% and there were no outlets nearby. The boy claimed the funeral home was holding him hostage without power for 3 hours of pure torture. He actually blamed the director when half the younger guests walked out because their phones died mid-speech. He demanded they install USB ports in the pews immediately, or he would leave a bad review online. Can people really not survive 1 hour without scrolling? 52. A delusional mother flipped through the guest book at the end of the service and started screaming. She was furious that not a single famous celebrity had come to pay their respects to her son. The woman claimed the funeral director failed to alert the national press to attract better quality mourners for the event. She genuinely believed her son was important enough to get Hollywood stars to fly in for the afternoon. She threw the book across the room because only normal people signed it. Do people think funerals are networking events for the stars? 53. An attention-seeking brother stopped the entire procession of cars in the middle of the highway. He was angry that the police motorcycle escort was just flashing lights and not using their loud sirens. The man screamed that he paid for a spectacle and wanted the whole town to know they were coming through. He demanded the officers turn on the wailing noise immediately to wake up the neighborhood. The police explained that sirens are for emergencies only, but he refused to listen to the law. Does grief really need to be that loud and annoying? 54. A hysterical daughter had a total meltdown in front of the main floral arrangement at the altar. She noticed the ribbon sash said father instead of daddy and accused the florist of ruining the day. The director showed her the order form where she clearly wrote father in her own handwriting. The woman screamed that he should have used his intuition to know what she really meant inside her heart. She demanded a refund for the flowers because the word was too formal for her liking. Can a single word really destroy a beautiful tribute? 55. A confused beneficiary walked into the office to pick up the official death certificates and looked baffled. He asked the director where his bonus check was and why it was not stapled to the paperwork. The man genuinely thought that reporting a death to the state resulted in an automatic cash payout, like a tax refund. He accused the funeral home of pocketing his government reward money and threatened to call the IRS. The staff had to explain that dying costs money, not the other way around. Do people think the government pays you for losing a relative? 56. A greedy sister called the funeral home 3 days after the burial with a sickening request. She realized they had buried her mother wearing a very expensive diamond watch, and now she wanted it back. The woman demanded the director go out to the cemetery with a shovel and retrieve the jewelry immediately. She did not care about disturbing the grave, she just wanted to sell the diamonds for cash. The director refused, but she threatened to go dig it up herself tonight with a garden tool. Is a watch really worth desecrating your own mother's grave? 57. An eccentric reptile owner was stopped at the chapel door while carrying a large green iguana. He screamed at the staff for discrimination because they would not let his lizard view the open casket. The man claimed the reptile was his emotional support animal and needed closure just like the human family members. He accused the funeral home of being speciesist and cruel to his cold-blooded best friend. He refused to enter the building unless the iguana could say goodbye to the deceased too. Do lizards really understand the complex concept of human mortality? 58. A meticulous widow stared at her husband in the casket and immediately called for the manager in a rage. She noticed his hair was parted on the left side, which was how he wore it for 50 years. The woman screamed that he had switched to the right side in 1998, and they should have known. She accused the stylist of not doing enough research into his grooming history. She demanded they comb it over right now in front of everyone so he looked current. Does a hair part really matter when the eyes are closed? 59. A bored teenager sat in the lobby waiting for the hearse to pull around and started complaining loudly. He was furious that the magazines on the coffee table were from 3 months ago and not current issues. The boy shouted at the receptionist that he was dying of boredom and expected fresh reading material. He claimed the funeral home was cheap for not having the latest Sports Illustrated for him to read. He forgot that he was there to mourn a relative, not catch up on news. Do people expect a funeral home to be a dentist waiting room? 60. A superstitious woman demanded her money back after spending the night alone in the private viewing chapel. She was angry because she stayed awake all night and did not see her husband's ghost appear once. The woman accused the funeral home of using materials that blocked spiritual energy and prevented him from visiting her. She claimed the building was defective because it did not facilitate a paranormal encounter for her closure. The director was speechless that she expected a haunting as part of the service package. Do you really want to see a ghost at a funeral? Honestly, if you think your family is difficult, just be glad they aren't trying to return your casket for a refund because of a rainy day. Now I have a serious question for you to answer below. If you could ban one specific song from being played at your own funeral, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. Smash that like button right now, subscribe to Liebuster for more absolute insanity, and share this with the one person who would definitely complain to the manager in the afterlife. Click the video on your screen right now because you seriously won't believe what we found next.